Hi, what we're going to do in this video is look at a sampling of my favorite World War II themed novels. This isn't a top 10 list, and it's only some of the great novels I've read that are set during the war. But everything here, I think, is worth reading. And we're going to start with a book that, if this were a top 10 list, this would probably be number one, The Beardless Warriors by Richard Matheson. Matheson, of course, is best remembered as a science fiction and horror writer. He wrote some of the most classic episodes of The Twilight Zone. He wrote a Star Trek episode. His novel I Am Legend is a true classic of science fiction. And I would recommend reading any of his short stories. He was a superb short story writer. But he wrote in other genres as well. He wrote some great westerns. If you're in the mood for a western, I would recommend his Journal of the Gun Years. And he wrote The Beardless Warriors, based, as I understand it, based in part on his own experiences during the war. And this is set in Europe in the winter of 1944. It's not the Battle of the Bulge. It's another location. But there's still some pretty intense combat going on. The premise is this squad where just by chance, all the replacements they get are 18 years old. And this really aggravates the grizzled veteran Sergeant Cooley, who commands the squad. But this is what he has to work with. The point of view character is named Hackermeyer. He's one of the 18-year-olds. He proves to be a really good soldier, but his backstory is that he never knew his mom. His dad was a drunk. His aunt and uncle that raised him didn't care about him. He's never experienced any sort of compassion or close personal relationship with anyone. So when he starts to admire and respect Sergeant Cooley, and eventually looking at Cooley as a father figure, he doesn't even understand what he's feeling. And the book, as far as his personal growth is concerned, is him coming to terms with those feelings. But I don't want to make this sound like it's just a soap opera. It is not. The combat scenes in this are incredibly intense. Matheson puts you there with bullets whizzing around you, with people dying, with terror and fear, with the need to get the job done even though you're terrified. It is just these incredibly intense action scenes, and there's a whole bunch of them scattered throughout the novel, including a lengthy final combat scene when the American unit is attacking a town to capture it. It's just extraordinary stuff, and I can't recommend it more highly. Next we come to The Good Shepherd by C.S. Forester. Forester's best remembered for the Horatio Hornblower novels, which were about a British officer, naval officer in the Napoleonic Wars. I read the Hornblower novels as a teenager after I learned, I think from the book The Making of Star Trek, that Hornblower was one of the inspirations for Captain Kirk. So naturally I had to read them at that point. This one is set in World War II. The main character is a naval officer, an American naval officer who commands a destroyer or a destroyer escort, I forget which, that is leading a convoy across the Atlantic through the worst of the U-boat-infested waters. And though Krauss is not a combat veteran at first, he's the highest-ranking officer, so he's in command of all the escorts. And he has to direct the action as they are trying to keep the ship safe, as they're dealing with picking up survivors when a ship is torpedoed, as they are tracking U-boats and attacking them. They gradually run out of depth charges. The whole thing is really tense from start to finish. And the character of Krauss spends something like 2 days on the bridge, with almost never leaving, as he directs this action. And it is just really, really good. When I read this as a teenager, by the way, when I was reading it, it felt like it was unfolding in real time as I was reading it. I don't think that was actually literally true, but that's what it felt like when I was reading it. And there's a point where Krauss has to use the bathroom, but he doesn't have time to leave the bridge. It's a very funny and humanizing moment for Krauss, where he just keeps trying to find a moment where he can go to the head and relieve himself. And reading this as a teenager, I decided, well, heck, I'm going to live this with Krauss. I'm not going to use the bathroom until he can. And I wasn't able to last that long. I had to run and use the bathroom before Krauss did. And fortunately, although you make silly decisions as a teenager, and this was probably the silliest game I played while reading ever, I wasn't stubborn enough to actually have an accident. I did go to the bathroom. But if I had been that stubborn, I probably wouldn't be telling this story now because it would be too embarrassing. Anyway, this was made into a movie a few years ago, which was on a streaming service. And the movie is pretty good. The book is superb. The movie doesn't quite do it justice. But you may see editions of this in the bookstore titled Greyhound rather than The Good Shepherd, which is what the title they used for the movie. So if you see that, it's the same book. Get it and read it. You won't regret it. The Glasshouse Gang novels by Gordon Landsborough. This is about a British officer who did time in the Glasshouse, a brutal military prison that the British had in North Africa while World War II was being fought in North Africa. He ends up starting a kind of rogue unit using people who have also been in the Glasshouse or people that he actually organized, an escape. And he makes this kind of rogue unit that hides in plain sight, just pretending to be a real unit, collecting supplies, occasionally robbing a payroll office for money for everybody. But they do get involved in combat. They might have to rescue one of their guys from the Germans, and eventually a British general finds out about them and kind of makes deals with them. Okay, we won't arrest you all today if you do this mission with us, and they become like this expendable unit where they can be used to get things done that need to be done to fight the Germans. But because they're this rogue unit of criminals, it doesn't matter if they come back or not. The action sequences throughout all four of these novels, once again, are extraordinary. These are really intense action sequences. The last one ends with several of the Glasshouse Gang's prisoners in a German convoy, and the Glasshouse unit trailing them. And the Germans know they're trailing them and are using the prisoners as a trap, but the British know the Germans know. But the Germans know the British know that the Germans know, and so on and so forth. And it leads to this extraordinary conclusion and a very satisfying end to the series when you come to the last of the four of them. So the Glasshouse Gang books, the Glasshouse Gang, Desert Marauders, Benghazi Breakout, and The Dead Commando. Unless it's been recently corrected, if you get the current ebook editions of these, they have them in the wrong order, and it's important to read these in order because the events of one novel lead directly into the next. So I have them here in the proper order: Glasshouse Gang, Desert Marauders, Benghazi Breakout, The Dead Commando. The ebooks have them ordered incorrectly, so keep that in mind if you read them via the ebooks. Alistair MacLean, my favorite author as a teenager. I could tell my parents, here's a list at Christmas or my birthday. Here's a list of all the Alistair MacLeans I have. Anything not on that list, you can get me. These are not all the World War II themed books he wrote. He also wrote thrillers that were set in what would have been contemporary times when he wrote them. But this is the cream of the crop of his World War II stuff. His very first novel was HMS Ulysses, which is set aboard the flagship of a convoy making the Murmansk run, taking merchant ships through Arctic waters to get to Murmansk, Russia, to bring them supplies. And the ships take, the Ulysses is gradually taking damage from air attacks. There's also U-boats. Escorts and merchant ships are taken down. It's a very open question whether any ship in that convoy will survive to reach Murmansk. There's great characters in it. It might be a little too heavy on melodrama with some of the character stuff that's going on, but that's a minor glitch, even if you consider it a glitch, because you do care about all the characters. The combat scenes are great. The description of the weather and the freezing cold and what it does to you, is just very, very vivid. Where Eagles Dare, I did a video specifically on my memories of this book a few weeks ago. You can watch that. The two Navarone books, The Guns of Navarone is a classic Commando book. It may be the classic Commando book. Its sequel, Force 10 from Navarone, kept me up till 3 in the morning reading it because I couldn't put it down when I got it as a Christmas gift. And it's just full of just incredible plot twists. If you have not read it, and if you haven't seen the movie version, which is significantly different from the book, but does give away the main plot twist, read the book first. The movie doesn't really worry about making the plot twist that much of a plot twist. The book, it's just extraordinary. And so if you haven't seen the movie, make sure you read the book before you watch the movie, so you go into it completely unspoiled. South by Java Head's an interesting one. It's set in the Pacific, right after the fall of Singapore in, I think, early 1942. When did Singapore fall? I think that's correct. It's the survivors of a merchant ship that sunk. And once again, the heat and the thirst and all that when they're in this little crowded lifeboat together is very vivid. They're also being chased by the Japanese, and they don't know why. We as readers know that there's a guy on board who has secret information that the Japanese need to get back. But the main character, Nicholson, the executive officer of the book, has absolutely no idea why the Japanese are so intent on capturing them. But he's a very clever officer, and he keeps up coming with plans to either, avoid the Japanese or even outfight them when he has to. I read a criticism of this book once that said it was kind of racist because the Japanese are presented as so incredibly brutal. But, somebody needs to read some history. Sadly, the Japanese military was very brutal during the World War II. And the depiction of them here with that brutality is accurate. And you can admit that without being racist or without condemning the Japanese people as a whole. It was just a historical reality. So I do not consider this book racist at all. I consider it a accurate representation of how brutal the Japanese military was. Jack Higgins. Now, this is just a few of the many World War II themed novels he wrote. Well, like MacLean, he also wrote a lot of thrillers set in what would have been contemporary times when he wrote them. He wrote from other eras, too. His book, Wrath of God, set in Mexico in the 1920s, is absolutely superb, and I would recommend reading that. As far as his World War II ones are concerned, The Eagle Has Landed is about a British commando team parachuting into Britain with the hopes of kidnapping Churchill. This is the first Jack Higgins book I read, which made me an instant fan of his work when I read it once again as a teenager. I have heard a criticism of this book that it's too many characters and too many subplots, and that actually could be a fair criticism. I get that. It doesn't bother me, probably partially out of nostalgia that I was so taken with this book as a 14 or 15-year-old that I just didn't see any flaws in it. And rereading it as an adult, I just enjoy it for everything, every bit of it, all the characters, all the subplots. But I could see somebody thinking that it's a little too convoluted as a legitimate criticism. But even if you think that while you read it, you'll still enjoy it because it's a great book all the same. A Game for Heroes is a fun one. It's a British commando who has to sneak onto one of the Channel Islands, the only parts of British home territory that were occupied by the Germans during World War II. It's late in the war, and he gets involved in these, first in a rescue boat to rescue a ship that's caught in a storm, and then later on in some shenanigans between a hardcore Nazi officer and a German officer who's a little more compassionate. And the war's coming to an end, and they're clashing over various things. And that leads to some great action scenes. Flight of Eagles is an interesting one. It's twin brothers who one of whom is raised in Germany and becomes a fighter ace for the Germans. The other is raised in America. He flies for the Finns when they're being invaded by the Russians, escapes to British, and becomes a ace with the RAF. So they're twin brothers, but they're on opposite sides. Things eventually come together where they both get involved in espionage stuff, and one brother takes the place of another, and so on and so forth. It's probably very unlikely as far as realism is concerned, but Higgins makes it work. It's another great book. Once again, this is only a few of the World War II novels he's read. You can pick up any of his books, actually, regardless of where they're set, and enjoy yourself because he was a great writer. Skylark Mission by Ian Macalister. This is a pen name for a writer named Marvin Albert, and he wrote several books under the Ian Macalister pen name that were superb thrillers in the Alistair MacLean, Jack Higgins school of thrillers. Skylark Mission was his World War II one. This was another edge-of-your-seat one when I read it. And you'll have to hope to get lucky to find this with a used book dealer or in a used bookstore, because all the books written under the Ian Macalister name have been out of print for years, and somebody really needs to bring them back into print. We're going to end with these three Captain Kenyon books by James MacDonnell. J.A.E. MacDonnell. MacDonnell is how you usually see him. He was an Australian author who has written tons, I think maybe over 100 books about naval warfare in World War II, all novels. I don't know if he's written any nonfiction, actually, but mostly novels at least. Usually his main characters were Australian. It would be on, the action would be on an Australian ship. I haven't done any research to back this up, but I suspect he wrote this short series about an American officer commanding a PT boat in order to try and to break into the American paperback market. And these three were printed by an American publisher. The Convert has the main character, Kenyon, transferring from a larger ship onto PT boats, and he has to earn the respect of his crew. Down the Throat deals in part with the consequences of sinking a Japanese ship that turned out to have Allied POWs on board. And South Pacific Fury is a mission where they have to rescue a coast watcher from a Japanese-occupied island and all the shenanigans that go on with trying to accomplish that mission. All three of these are great books. PT boats are just inherently cool. So anytime a PT boat is the center of action in a World War II novel, I'm there to read it. But these books are all great. MacDonnell's stuff is being reprinted now electronically in the U.S. They haven't gotten to these yet, and I'm curious when they do, because I think South Pacific Fury, when it was published in Australia, was given the title Combat Assignment. And I have seen pictures of the cover of that book, and I think it is the same book as South Pacific Fury. But I am not. I am only 95% sure of that. And just out of my own curiosity, I'm really hoping that when they get to where these books are reprinted electronically, or when if I ever stumble across the Australian version of this one, Combat Assignment, in a used bookstore, which is probably unlikely because I don't get to Australia very often, and it would have to turn up in an American used bookstore. But I'd like to be able to compare it to the copy of South Pacific Fury that I have to see if it is indeed the same book. I haven't been able to find any confirmation of that, and there's nothing on the copyright page of South Pacific Fury that says it was ever published under another title. So I don't know, and I'm hoping to be able to find out one day. And those are just a smattering of the World War II novels that I've read that I can recommend. Some of them you will have to find through used book dealers or used bookstores. Others would be readily available. But check your libraries as well. But read any of these, and you will have a good time reading them. And thank you for listening.